Very good morning to all of you. Indeed, timing and place would be important factors, not only for your trading, but also in terms of politics. I have many friends across the political divide in Malaysia, in both the previous as well as the current administrations. I can tell you before the last election, a lot of my friends from, at that time, the opposition and not the ruling party, perhaps they were not feeling very good because they thought that they did not have a lot of winning chances in this round of election. But as it turns out, things could not be more wrong. Indeed, they won this round of election. May I ask you, on May 9th, evening, what were you doing on the voting day itself? I think most of us were waiting for the results, watching TV, or just looking at our handphones and so on. If you were watching television, perhaps you would see me on Channel News Asia. I was the commentator for Channel News Asia. And guess where I was commenting from? I was commenting from, indeed, perhaps, at that time it looked like the right place, but by now it looked like the wrong place, namely PWTC. Huh? Because traditionally, it's a sure win for UMNO, right, usually. So the Prime Minister of the day will appear on PWTC around 10 o'clock and declare victory, and everybody will be happy. But on that evening, Channel News Asia asked me to be at PWTC by 9 o'clock, right? I was expecting a big crowd, but when I went there, it's almost like a ghost town. You could hardly see anybody there. In fact, I had to really look for a security guard to open the door for me into PWTC. And even inside, it's still very empty. Only perhaps at the deepest rooms of PWTC would you see a few Barisan supporters. They all look very sad and dejected, all looking at their handphones. And by that time, I knew it was over. Huh? And sure enough, Prime Minister at that time, former Prime Minister Najib, did not appear at PWTC. And the next evening, of course, you saw our former Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, once again became our Prime Minister. So we have a change of government. We are going to look briefly at the new government and its policies. We are going to look at some of our socio-economic outlook. We are going to look at some scenarios for the trade war, and then and how Malaysia will interact with the United States and China, and of course China's Belt and Road Initiative. And then I'm going to conclude with hopefully some introduction of some economic sectors which I feel would be very interesting in the future. So, what were some of the popular expectations for the new government? I think there are at least two sets of expectations. Number one is for the new government to hopefully revitalize the economy. Huh? A lot of our businessmen friends have been telling us that business is bad. So, now there's a change of government. Whether it's fair or not, people put the hope, people put the expectations on turning the economy around on the new government. The least thing that the new government can do is, of course, the repeal of the very infamous GST. Huh? And then another expectation is, of course, for the government, for the new government, to conduct very open, very thorough, very careful investigations into some of these scandals, some of these scandals which have been previously suppressed, such as 1MDB, and thereby hopefully bring back the so-called rule of law and a healthier political environment. Well, our new cabinet took almost 2 months to to be completed. I thought only Germans do something like that, but it turns out Malaysia also does something like that. The Germans would take half a year to fill the cabinet, right? So we take 2 months only, but that was perhaps the longest in our country's history. The members of the cabinet, the ministers, they look rather professional. After all, for the first time, our prime minister and deputy prime minister, they are both doctors. And then there are a lot of lawyers and various other professionals in the cabinet. And then the ministers look rather young. There's one who is as young as 25 years old, and then another one 35 or so. But of course, all their young ages were all balanced out by our prime minister, right? Yeah. He single-handedly balanced out the age average of his cabinet. So you still have a cabinet which is, I think, about 50 years old, right? Instead of 20-something. But it is nice of the new PM to not take on another portfolio. So he's no longer the finance minister, for example, so that he can focus on his job as the prime minister. The finance minister is Mr. Lim Guan Eng. I see a more or less a small little tiny problem. Some people think it's a good thing, but I think in the future it's going to become a political problem. And that is the more or less equal distribution of cabinet posts among the various component parties of Pakatan. You see, last time, UMNO, the previous ruling party, main ruling party, well, UMNO would not salang lah, but UMNO almost like sapu semua, right? All the major and most important ministries were sapu by UMNO. And then the other 12 or 13 component parties of Barisan, they were each given a few just to decorate themselves, right? Well, now Dr. Mahathir is adopting a totally opposite approach. Each component party, how many component parties in Pakatan Harapan? There are 4, plus the Pakatan's friend from Sabah. There are 5 parties, right? Each of them get about 5 to 7 ministers' posts, right? Regardless of their size. What are the 2 larger parties in Pakatan? PKR with about 48 seats, DAP I think 42 or 44, right? These are very big parties. Well, they each only get, I think about DAP maybe 6 or 7, PKR 7 or 8. Whereas Dr. Mahathir's party, approximately how many seats? I think 13 or 14, right? And then the other Amanah only 11 or so. They also get about 5 or 6 posts in the cabinet. So if you are Amanah MP or if you are Pribumi MP, you are really a lucky guy. When you're elected, almost you become minister already, right? Whereas if you are in PKR, well, you really had to fight your way out to be a minister, right? Which is why PKR is exactly doing that. PKR is fighting itself out. The latest party polls, I think, for the vice president of PKR, there are about 19 or 20 people, competing to be vice presidents of PKR. So this is going to sort of create a little bit of disharmony, both within individual Pakatan parties as well as among those Pakatan parties. And then there's our eminent persons group with its chairman, Tun Daim Zainuddin, who is supposed to restore some of the confidence in our markets and in our economy, and hopefully not having foreign capital fleeing Malaysia. Now, Tun Daim Zainuddin visited China about 2 weeks ago and met the Prime Minister of China wearing sandals. So that's, I think that would be unprecedented in China. And the last person I have seen doing something similar, I have not seen it, I saw it on TV, was Mohandas Gandhi, India's Gandhi, also doing similar things, right? Well, so that is about to to hopefully restore some of the confidence. And then GST. The GST was repealed about 3 days ago. Why was the GST so hated? I think there are at least 3 reasons. The tax itself, I think, is not a big problem. It's just that there are 3 reasons, at least, why people hated the GST. Number one, it's what I call opportunistic overpricing, right? The GST is 6%. Your goods and your products would have prices rising by 16, 26, 36%, right? So a lot of consumers who complain that GST make a lot of goods and products very expensive. It's opportunistic overpricing. The second one, it's about the procedures, what I call procedural nuisance, especially for small and medium enterprises. You see, if you are big corporations, you are multinational corporations, or if you are governments, GLCs, you will have a whole department just to help you manage your tax, right? Just to help you avoid unnecessary taxation and so on. But if you are a small and medium enterprise, typically you ask some uncle or auntie on a part-time basis to do your accounts for you, right? Some retire accountants and so on a part-time basis, on a friendly basis. And it's very difficult for them to focus on how to help you avoid some of this taxation. And furthermore, I will give you one example, and that is my wife. She's an architect. She provides architectural services, doing all this building design for people. So after she completed some of her works, she would charge her clients, right? How does she do that? She would issue invoice. Well, in a perfect world, when she issues invoice, the client would pay in, let's say, 2 weeks or maybe even a month, right? So everybody's happy. But the point is, once you issue invoice, at least there was GST, before you get paid, you already must pay the government the 6%. Let's say the invoice amount is 100,000, you must already pay 6,000 to the government, even before you collected the amount. And I don't know about KL, I'm sure KL people are all very nice and punctual and so on. But in Sabah, where I'm from, sometimes there are clients who did not pay at all. Or they say, 100,000, you kill me, huh? And then they pay 10,000. Whereas you need, typical Sabah, 100,000, they cut down to 10,000. Very, because the work already done, you cannot undo it. You want to sue them in small claims court, it's very difficult. So sometimes, it makes the process even longer, right? So then she has to pay all this GST beforehand, and sometimes she did not get to collect the fees. This is in Chinese, we say 赔了夫人又折兵. You lose twice, basically. Not only you didn't get paid, you still have to pay out furthermore to the government. That's why people hated it. And then there's, of course, also this perception that the income, the government's income from GST is being used to purchase some handbags for some other people's wives. Yeah. So that's perception. I'm just reflecting the perception. It may or may not be my own opinion, right? So there's this perception. It's all about wives invoices, wives handbags. Well, now they are going to bring in the so-called SST in September. There are various arguments as to whether it's higher or lower than the GST. But I think at least you must not make paying for SST as difficult as, for example, the GST. And also, the government has to make sure the proceeds from the SST is mostly used to pay our mounting national debt. What do we mean by mounting national debt? The previous administration, they estimated our national debt to be about 660 billion ringgit. The new government after some investigations, found out the actual national debt was over 1 trillion. It's about 1.1 trillion. So that's about almost 100% more, maybe 80% more than the previous estimates, right? And there are a lot of criticisms, among which they said, well, you calculated this new amount not according to internationally accepted calculation methods. Why? Well, internationally, the standard is you count national debt only as debts which are incurred by the government, from foreign sources or from domestic sources, right? But the new calculation, they included those debts which were undertaken by GLCs, for example, and in which the government served as guarantors. Now, just like you serving as guarantor for your friends or your relatives' loan, right? What happens if your friends or relative cannot pay that loan? Huh? Yeah, these are all the horror stories from 1980s. Those stories your mom told you, remember? Friends borrowing money borrowing money in order to put into the cooperatives, and then later on cooperatives collapse, cannot pay back. Not only friends, friends escaped to Papua New Guinea, disappeared. So your mom had to pay the friends' debt and so on, all those horror stories. Same thing. The point is this. The point is, in theory, if our GLCs are borrowing this money to undertake certain economic development activities, it's fine, because those economic activities later on will earn money to recoup those debts, right? But again, the allegation is, of course, some of this money which a GLC borrow were diverted to buy handbags and various other things, again, for some other people's spouses. So then who has to foot the bill? You and me. My friends has a fashion brand called You and Me. In Mandarin, it's called You Mei. You and Me. You and me all have to pay, right? So that's why the new government decided to count those government guarantees as part of our national debt, and it's mounting 1.1 trillion. So what does the new government do? Well, they do this thing called the tabung harapan, right? Remember you went to the DAP ceramas, they pass along this collection box, right? And then you put, I don't know how much money inside. So they are repeating a larger scale, they call it tabung harapan, to pay our national debt. I can tell you, the tabung harapan is like one drop in the ocean, cannot pay the national debt one. But it's good. So to make sure we constantly feel that, we have to be responsible for not only our country's expenses, but also our own expenses. So there's also austerity measures, namely the minister cut their salaries by how many percent? By 10%, and freezing civil servants' pay rise and so on. You see, our minister's salary is already very miserable. Minister every month, 100, not 100, 10, 15,000 to 20,000 as minister. Yeah. I mean, you can, if you trade and so on, you can make, I think, that kind of amount already, right? They still have to undertake 10% of pay cut, whereas some other ministers from some other country down south is paid maybe 100 times more than that, right? Yeah. So I pity them because they have to take that pay cut. Also, cancellation of the high-speed rail. I mean, postponement, we cannot call it cancellation because some other countries then will say you have to compensate us. So we say postponement of high-speed rail. High-speed rail. You see countries sometimes, big countries from the north, small countries from the south. You know that Malaysia is now in a very difficult situation, right? You must have sympathy. You must have solidarity, right? You should not take this opportunity to try to squeeze Malaysia. I say some countries, some big, some smaller. I'm not saying one country, I say many countries, but some big, some small. Huh? No. Well, this is the small country, this is the big country. ECRL. ECRL also, it's about to be postponed. It's postponed. The pipelines, oil and gas pipeline between east and west coast of Peninsular Malaysia and also across Sabah, that also will be postponed, right? Now, I have said, I think, enough good things about our new government. I'm now going to say some a bit negative things about the new government. What I don't like about the new government. Number one is this thing called BREAM. I remember Tun Mahathir in his campaign speeches were heavily criticizing BREAM, right? Saying this were handouts, cash handouts to people. It's going to demoralize people, make people lazy and so on. But now they are continuing with BREAM. I haven't heard them about to cancel BREAM or anything. So they are apparently, at least for the short term, they are continuing with BREAM. Subsidies for petrol. Well, everybody would like not so expensive petrol prices, but the government should use this money not to subsidize petrol prices, but to make sure our public transport is well developed, so that our country would not pollute its environment to such an extent. And my old-time, unfavorite subject, the national car, right? I think, I don't know about you, I hated Proton, I hated the national car project, and now our Prime Minister wants to bring back the national car project. I think it's a very wrong move, because for a very long time, I was forced to choose between good quality but very expensive imported cars. And it's expensive because the government, they would impose very high import taxes. I have a choice of either that or very bad quality and not so cheap cars, domestically made. I think it is immoral. I think it is, it should be illegal to impose these things on us. And now he wants to revive it. I'm going to go on record in voicing my opposition and see whether I'll get arrested under, do we still have ISA? We don't, we have some other laws. After all, he's famous for arresting people under those laws. Yeah. Hey, you think change government, everything free, can say anything you want, will not get arrested. Already quite a few people get arrested for saying things already. It's just, a change of another group of people to oppress you. It's not like you get free. Well, don't get me wrong. Well, all the searches and seizures of handbags and Jane Birkins and Hermes and all these wonderful things you also saw in newspapers. I think on the one hand, it is important to recognize that there's popular expectation for very thorough, very open, and very fast investigations and prosecutions. You feel shocked when you see people go to court, right? Yeah, you see people go to court in suits and ties and so on. But as a responsible new government, you must also balance that sort of populist justice side with, really careful investigation so that you will not be perceived as conducting political revenge. I think it's important for the new government not to appear to be doing so. What are our short to medium term challenges? I think there are mainly two. Number one, of course, as I say, to revive the economy. But number two, also to make sure the fruits of the economy or the fruits of the economic development is enjoyed by most of us, and not enjoyed only by a small group of elites. After all, we are in a very nice hotel, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, these are some of the activities I attended. The Boao Asia Forum in Hainan Island, received by President Xi Jinping. You see, a small group of about 20 people received by Xi Jinping. Out of that 20 people, 2 are from Sabah. You see, how can not Sabah first? This is Xi Jinping, this is me, and this is Tan Sri Andrew Sheng, also from Sabah, former chairman of Securities Commission of Hong Kong, but originally a Sabahan. Now, what are some of the strategic sectors which I feel would be of tremendous potentials in future? I think one is agriculture. What kind of tree is this? Rubber. Rubber tree. I know rubber prices are low now, but rubber tree is a very fruitful tree. It can yield rubber for more than 20 years, and then at the end of the day, because I'm from Sabah, you can cut it down. Now, durian is all the rage nowadays. You can also think of planting durian trees. For example, there's this company in Sabah. They are partnering with China to plant 100,000 durian trees in Sabah. Bornean Timber, this is a company from Sabah. I sit on their board as a board member. Ecotourism. Look at all these waterfalls and so on, right? This is at one of Bornean Timber's so-called forest management units. So I visited there. This is me, by the way. I visited there about 2 days before President Trump met Chairman Kim Jong-un, Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un, right? So of course I need to make the Supreme Leader posture here, right? The Supreme Leader posture. Now, you see, Bornean Timber is a timber company. Sometimes they have these, what we call wood heads and wood ends. I mean, you just want the log, right? The head and the tail of the tree, sometimes you just cut it off and throw it away, right? So my wife is not only an architect, but also a designer. She would use that to make some design, and a table like this can go up to 20,000, 20,000. Another sector, I think, would be the so-called recycling or upcycling sector. What is the difference between recycling and upcycling? Recycling is basically, reusing the waste materials after some, for example, cleansing and so on. Upcycling, it's about adding values to some waste materials. I will give you some examples. For example, recycling. You reuse or refashion your clothes and various other things. You turn your food waste into fertilizer, which you then use to plant more veggies. By the way, this is my back garden in Sabah. We are self-sufficient in terms of our veggie consumption. We don't need to. We haven't bought from anybody, veggies, for more than a year. And this is upcycling. This is a toilet bowl. Maybe I was too forceful. The toilet bowl cracked. So originally we thought of just throwing it away. But my wife was very creative. She uses it as a pot to plant mango tree. This is actually a mango tree. Now it's much higher than this. Now, it's also about using plastic bags, for example, to make handbags. Remember just now we talked about Jane Birkin and various other handbags? Now, my wife would have plastic handbags. Now, she designed all these plastic handbags and teaching some students to design the same. You see, it's nice to have a wife like that because you don't need to, give all the Hermes bags and so on. What is this? This is the inner tube of bicycles, bicycle wheels. You can make it into belt and even earrings and even necklaces. This is a bicycle wheel, and you can make them into belts. Looks very rustic. Looks like those very expensive Australian products. Oops. Okay, this is called terrarium. You use bottles. You can just plant some tiny little plants inside, which only my wife knows how to do. I don't. And something like that go for about 100 ringgit. You can sell it for about 100 ringgit. Just some small plants. Your ang pao, use ang pao. You can make into paper or you can make into earrings. Ang pao into earrings. And you use wires and cables. You can make them into necklaces. This is nice. You know, hotel room, all these 3-in-1 Nescafe packets. You can use that to make handbags also. My wife trains some ladies from Kota Bulut. Kota Bulut is a small town in Sabah. She trains those ladies and they make handbags out of those 3-in-1 Nescafe packets. And guess what this is? For those of you who also drink Nescafe, but the high-class Nescafe is called what? Nespresso, right? Nespresso machine, there's the capsule. The Nespresso capsules, you can make them into all these things, earrings and necklaces and so on. Now, this is a piece designed by my wife. These are the Nespresso capsules, and I think the cost is maybe 5 ringgit, and she's selling for about 500 ringgit. Yeah. The brand is called Lawa Bana. Oh, and this is last night, by the way. Last night I was in Sabah. I flew in this morning. You see, we attended this prestige Malaysia ball, and you see, no Jane Birkin, no Hermes. My wife is holding the Kota Bulut ladies' Nescafe bag. This is the necklace made from wire, and this is also made from wire, even the earrings and so on. So what I'm telling you is you can add value to all of this. So I would just like to end my presentation on a hopefully positive note. I want to thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oh, for what a fruitful sharing session.